Chief Learning Officer webinar, sponsored by Conduit. I hope everyone's having a great start to their week and excited as I am for today's webcast, Re-envision your workforce enablement strategy to focus on performance. My name is Steve, and as always, I'll be working in the background here to help answer any general or technical questions you may have. Before we begin, though, I would like to go over a few key reminders. First, there is no dial-in number for attendees. All audio will be streamed through your speakers or headphones, so please adjust your volume there accordingly. Now at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a variety of icons. You will have access to all these tools throughout today's session, so please feel free to customize your console however you would like. Among these tools, we have the Attendee Chat, Ask a Question, Resources, and Certifications. If you have any questions or experience any technical issues throughout this webcast today, please click on the purple icon marked Q&A, type the question in the box provided, and click Submit. If you have a technical question, the answer will appear here. Any content-related questions for our speakers today will be read at the end if time allows. The certification codes for this webinar will appear in the certification box located to the right of your slides once you have met the required watch time. You can download today's webcast slides via the green icon labeled Resource List. Don't forget, you can chat with your fellow attendees by joining the live attendee chat. And finally, you will receive a link to the recording of this webinar in a follow-up email, so please allow at least 24 hours after the conclusion of the event before the information is sent. And now at this time, I would like to go ahead and introduce our first speaker for today's webcast. We have Debbie Gower, Senior Director for Conduit Learning Solutions, and I believe Debbie's going to go ahead and start us off. So Debbie, take it away.
Steve, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Kate and I, who you'll meet just shortly, are very, very happy to have this chance to facilitate a discussion with you. And we thank you very much for taking time out of your day to join us today. I'm joined by Kate Ahern. Kate is a learning strategist, also with Conduit, and part of my team. So why don't we go ahead and get into it? As you take a look at this visual, particularly as it builds, there's nothing that you're going to see there that's going to be of any surprise to you. You've either lived it, are living it yourself, see others around you who are living it, and what it really represents is the fact that, change is just ever present. It occurs at faster and faster pace. The depth and breadth of it continues to increase. And that's one of the reasons why we started 2 years ago. And I'm going to tell you a little bit, you're going to get a little bit of a history lesson. 2 years ago, we started thinking a little bit differently about how we wanted to approach supporting our client base to help them with enabling their workforce to perform. So what you'll see here is a very broad view of content in various forms from various sources. You'll see learning content, which you're very familiar with. Most of you will also be very familiar with the high level of connectivity and integration that L&D content has with knowledge management. Those two have been talked about as being, converged for probably 2 decades or more. But also take a look at the other 3 sources of content: internal communications, internal marketing. And by internal marketing, I mean, if you are in business where you've got a product or a service and you've got anything new that you're rolling out, if you've got an enhancement or something different or that would need to change, that type of internal marketing is as important as what you do externally, because it signals and triggers something potentially different about what your workforce needs to know or to do as a result of that change. And then lastly, you've got policies and governance. Well, we started looking at those 5 sources and observing the importance of connectivity between all 5 of them about 2 years ago. It was in the late 3rd quarter, early 4th quarter of 2019. We sort of pondered on it. We did a little bit of market scanning to try to see if there was anyone else who was making the same observation, anything out there. We didn't see anything. So we teamed up with training industry and did a joint study, which I'm going to share with you a little bit. But the importance of where we were, the importance of where we were and the insights that we got from some of our early deliberations were the fact that if you look at any organization's workforce, it's more than just employees. It's your employee base, whether they're part-time and full-time, it's contingent workers, and it's third parties, whether they're channel partners or other key third parties who are well integrated into your operations. And so as we think about how you support performance from each of those groups who are part of your workforce, we have to start thinking about it potentially a little bit differently. The goal that we realized is creating better worker self-sufficiency. And I'm distinguishing that from self-service. Self-service came into being, probably about the mid-90s. And it was not necessarily viewed as a welcome approach because a lot of what self-service meant in the early days was something that somebody used to do for me, I now have to do myself. And so that's why it wasn't always as well received. When we distinguish that today with self-sufficiency, it's making certain that I can do what I want, when I want, how I want. So that's part of the key factor there. The other thing that you'll see, and this is a little bit of a forward look from where we were 2 years ago, as a result of the pandemic and the operating model changes, that all of that just punctuated and made the position that we were about to take even more clear, that companies on almost a dime turned into virtual operations. And since then, many companies are choosing to stay that way. Others are going into more of a hybrid model, and others still are in process of more of a return to what used to exist, the model that used to exist prior to the pandemic coming along. The fact that you've got 5 sources of content is important because, what do you do with all of that? And what the other observation we made is that it will be equally important to dynamically be able to curate from these sources and manage them. So with that, we entered into this study. And if you take a look at the quote there, that was the explanation that we provided to the survey participants as we were trying to help them to understand the type of view, the type of perspectives that we were seeking from them. And we were looking for any type of interaction, kind of regardless of source, that was necessary in order for organizational operations to succeed. The findings from this, and I'm only going to share three sets of findings right now, were pretty profound. So let's go into the first view of this. One of the questions that we asked was, do you offer a unified effort, a unified initiative around trying to make sure that you are enabling the experience of anyone in your workforce? The data showed, as you can see here, that companies who attested, and this, I should have also told you, this study was done late spring of 2020. So it was shortly after the pandemic started. The findings showed that companies who self-attested over the past 5 years, so it wasn't an immediate, where are you right now from a financial performance perspective, but the past 5-year view, companies who self-attested in their survey responses that they were doing well and or growing, you can see that 62% of those companies who were performing well, who had high revenue growth, said that they paid a lot of attention to this unified approach to enable their workforce. By the same token, companies that self-attested that they were doing less well or had negative growth, the best that you could do there in terms of efforts around this unification is, to a moderate extent, where you've got the 40% listed. So that was an interesting finding. We then further asked, how are you doing it? If you consider all those 5 sources of content that I previously mentioned, what are you using? And again, results are pretty profound. Companies that were growing and high performing, doing well, by and large, used all 5 sources of content to help create that strategy that allowed for the unified approach to enable the workforce. And the thing that I found the most interesting about companies who were not doing well from a performance perspective is that the source that they used most frequently was policy. Well, that's your governance, it's your SOPs. That gets really much more into a compliance orientation rather than a performance orientation. So the last result I'm going to share with you from the study is a little bit different perspective. So instead of companies who are high performers, what we stratified was the companies who offered the unified experience versus those who didn't, who were more disjointed or haphazard or unintentional in anything that they did. And you can see again, across those key performance indicators of revenue and market share and profitability, employee satisfaction, retention, that those companies who did intentionally try to offer this unified approach outperformed those who didn't. So with that as interesting perspectives, it helped to inform and validate the approach that we thought was going to be necessary, and that is one that is focused on performance. So given that, Kate, why don't you do me a favor and let's talk a little bit more and bring it to life about the how-tos with what we see as being a key supporting factor in being able to help companies to perform in order to achieve the business impact they desire.
Thanks, Debbie. So it's all about performance, right? And so first I want to clear up something. Let's start with a misnomer about knowledge and how it correlates to performance. It doesn't guarantee that employees are going to reach their performance goals. It just doesn't. Unfortunately, traditionally, when it comes to learning, many organizations have really primarily focused their efforts on knowledge, what people need to know. And they rarely lack for content in this respect. There's tons of knowledge out there. I'm sure you see it in your own companies. So what we've experienced is that requesters will come to us and say, my folks really need to know about this regulation and this policy, and they need to know every little detail about it. And then they wonder why their employees still violate the policy. Well, it's really not surprising because it was all about the know. But when we take a workflow learning approach with a performance mindset, then we move past the knowing. We find out about the doing. We prioritize what the audience needs to be able to do. In other words, perform at the end of the day. And then we can actually prioritize those tasks and prioritize them according to, well, where are the biggest pain points? Where are the biggest errors? Where's the biggest risk? And by really prioritize that into the learning, we are then able to design a much better, much more relevant learning program. So it's all about perform and knowing what people need to do versus the know. But this takes a really big mindset for people who have always kind of succumbed to the SMEs saying, people need to know this, they need to know that, they need to know that. When we try to whittle it away and say, okay, this is just cognitive overload. What do they really need to know in order to do? So we move it around now. We don't start with know, we start with do. What do people need to do? And then we ask the question, what do people need to know in order to do that? So it's really a performance mindset. And by doing this, by having that performance mindset, we're going to have much more effective workflow learning, and it will increase efficiency. It will increase effectiveness of our workforce to be able to compete in the marketplace. It's going to increase their agility because it will improve their ability to adapt to change on a regular basis. As Debbie talked about earlier, it's all about change these days. And it's also going to enable them to build new skills. So in addition to all that, those great benefits, workflow learning actually does address all 5 moments of learning need. And that's probably not anything new. I'm sure many of you have seen or heard about the 5 moments of need. And this is a framework that was created by Con Gottfredson of Apply Synergies, founding partner of Apply Synergies. And he came up with this many, many years ago based on his research. And if you aren't familiar with it, I'll just give you a little bit of information here, but there's so much more you can find online. This framework really accelerates the learner's journey to on-the-job competence. It addresses the full range of workers' needs when they learn and when they perform their work. So it really emphasizes performance support, right? Performance support content that can be used at all 5 moments in need. And we need to start our design with the moment of apply. And apply is the moment where you're actually doing the job, all right? So when you're learning something new, and then you're learning more down the line, and you have to solve a problem or something changes, that's all great times to have performance support. But when we design for workflow learning, we are starting with the moment of apply, and we're trying to figure out what are people doing and what do people need at that moment when they're doing. So, you know, as Debbie mentioned earlier, when she talked about the research that we engaged in, this 5 moments of need, this framework, this is a more unified approach to supporting employees and helping them be successful. And Conduit believes so strongly in this framework that we entered into a business agreement with Apply Synergies last year to be a preferred affiliate. So we're really excited about bringing this to the next level. So
yeah, and Kate, I'll be able to connect the dots a little bit better when we show some examples at the end about how that front end about the content and dynamic content curation and management all fits in.
Right. Great. All right. So let's take a look about how this differs from traditional learning. So I'm sure many of you have been in L&D for a while. If not, welcome. But I'm sure most of you have been in L&D for a while. And so you know, you may have seen this, but if not, let me explain it to you. And what you've probably observed over the times, even as a learner, is the more traditional learning journey is shown here. The green area to the left is the train phase. And that is normally a formal learning intervention, could be a live classroom training, could be a virtual live training, it could be an e-learning. And maybe along with that is a resource like a job aid that is provided to people either during the class or afterwards, but nothing else. So you'll notice what happens here is there is an immediate dip that takes place after that learning takes place, after that training. And that's called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. That's when the learner will forget what they learned in the classroom starting immediately after they took that class. And, you know, within 6 days, they will have forgotten 75% of what they learned, if not given an opportunity to reinforce or to use that information that they learned. So certainly we've learned over the past years that event-based training is not the way to go. That's not where you're going to get your return on investment. So in order to counteract that Ebbinghaus forgetting curve and bring our employees up to full competency on the job, we really can't leave things to chance. We have to intentionally fill the void that is represented by the 2 question marks that you see here. So how do we do that? Well, what we need to do is we need to shorten the time in training. We have to shorten that green train phase and get people out into the environment quickly. But we have to be very intentional about what we do here. We don't want to train people on everything. So there is definitely opportunity here to shorten up that time period. What we're going to do is we're going to build targeted training that focuses on the tasks for which the business could experience serious risk if employees don't do them successfully. So this is when we give them an opportunity to actually practice and do things in the classroom or with one-on-one with a coach or through a simulation and e-learning, something where they're getting feedback, so that we know that they're in a good spot, they've practiced before they actually go into the environment. But we've really thought about, well, what are those tasks or behaviors that they really need to, are most critical and have the highest impact to failure that we need to pull into targeted training. So we're really focusing on the tasks here and any knowledge they need to know to do that task. Okay, where traditionally we spent days and days in the classroom shoving lots of knowledge down people's throats, right? And then maybe at the end we said, okay, now put it into practice. So it's again, this is performance mindset of pulling back on your training to what really is the most critical task that people need to learn.
And that's the no. So that's the no. We're not saying you step away from the no. No has a very important role in this strategy, in this approach. But what we're saying is do it a little bit more planful and intentionally about the no versus the do.
Right. And always start with the do, so that your targeted learning is a combination of both knowledge transfer as well as practice on those really risky tasks. And then that takes care of the training. But how do we close the gap that exists in that blue area when they leave training and they go back on the job? Okay. Well, we need to be really intentional there too, right? Really intentional about the informal learning that takes place in the way of performance support. And we want that performance support to be very easy to access and use when they're on the job. This is going to be what facilitates that transfer. You see that transfer at the bottom of the slide. That's going to facilitate that transfer over into their day-to-day work. And it's also going to sustain the transfer. So, for example, making sure the employee has support for when they encounter a problem or a more difficult situation on the job. So really, for best results here, folks, the employee should be given the opportunity to use the performance support while they're in that targeted learning. They should be pointed towards it. They should practice going into the performance support just so that they're assimilated to that and they're not looking at it for the first time when they're back on the job and doing the work. That's really the best results. So that's my point there. Performance support does in fact take a lot of different forms. We're going to talk about now the resources in a typical performance support tool. Okay. So we use this concept of the performance support pyramid, and it basically represents all the deepening layers of information and levels of support that you can provide to your employees so that they are supported while they're doing their work. At the top of this pyramid, you'll see the word context. This is usually in the form of what we call a workflow map that shows people people can clearly see it, it's very memorable, and they know where they are in that workflow. And so they can dig deeper into the information that they need at that moment in time. So we chunk all the information underneath this. Components of this performance support can be job aids. It can be supporting knowledge documents. It can be who to call if all else fails. Who am I going to reach out to? Who's that human contact that I need to reach out to? But it's all about organizing this in a way that people can get very quickly to the information that they need, and they don't have to wade through all of this extra information that's available. We've seen many intranet sites that have loads of great content, right? Or even knowledge bases that have loads of great content. But if people can't get to it quickly, if they get frustrated trying to find a piece of information, they're going to walk away, and then they're going to start bothering the subject matter experts and wasting their time, right? We want self-sufficiency here and ease of use. So let me summarize kind of where we've been up until this point. That the workflow learning solution includes both targeted training and performance support. It considers all 5 moments of learning need. And content design starts by understanding what people need to do in order to provide context through the workflow. So now I'm going to talk about performance support through, you know, how it comes to life through some different digital support solutions. So before I actually show you a couple, I just want to explain that digital support solutions are very flexible and scalable, meaning that at the end of the day, you meet your organization where it is from a readiness standpoint. They can take a lot of different forms, and the final solution at the end of the day is going to be highly dependent on the scope of the project that you're working on. So let's take a look at two of these examples. The first one is more low tech, an ebook, and the other is one that utilizes a technology platform, such as an electronic performance support system, also known as an EPSS. Either way, both of these solutions will meet the employee needs of being self-directed. They're going to be able to quickly and easily find what they need to assist them at the moment of need. And in other words, it's going to support that pull approach as opposed to that push approach that we've done traditionally in the past, where tons of information are pushed to an employee without any context, and often takes people away from what they're doing, as opposed to staying with the task at hand. So again, digital support can look very different depending on the scope of your project and where your readiness is.
Hey, Kate, let me add one more thing. That was one of the things I was most impressed about before we decided to make a commitment down this path, is the fact that I was able to come to a reassurance that it's flexible, scalable, and allows us to work with our client base to meet them where they are at that point in time. Not every client, not every company is in a situation to be able to go to a full-blown, highly, the highest level of technical functionality driven approach, but we can create that evolutionary process.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's take a look at the first one. So this is a workflow learning ebook that we developed to train and support employees in an inspection process. And in the ebook, you'll see on the right-hand side here, the workflow map. This is absolutely key. This is what provides that visual to the employee to give them the context of the work that they're doing. And it can help them really picture the work processes. They can click on any part of this visual and it will proceed to the information that's associated with that process. In this case, we're going to click on Assess, which is part of the visual at the top. And what this does is this brings us to the Assess process page. This shows us all the associated tasks in the flow chart. And notice the workflow map is also repeated up in that upper left-hand corner. It not only lets the employee know where they are currently in that workflow, it also acts as a gateway back to the original page. This way, an employee can quickly get to another process if needed. So let's see what happens when we click on the first task in this process that's called Assess Site Processes. So now we see a deeper layer of information associated with the task. Remember, I talked about that performance support pyramid and the deepening layers of support. Now we're at a deeper layer. There's a lot more information here. On the right-hand side, the employee sees two categories, the about and the additional support. These reference materials allow the employee to go deeper in their learning. And let's see what happens when we click on customer service in the about section. Again, another layer of information is going to pop up with content that's relevant to the employee's job. So as you can see, organizing this information in alignment with the contextual workflow helps the employee get to the information they need in 2 clicks, 10 seconds. So,
Kate,
now that we've seen that example, I'm going to pass it over to Debbie. She's going to go from that ebook, which is that much lower tech solution, to that higher tech solution in the EPSS. So Debbie, if you can share an example with us, that'd be great.
Will do. So what you're seeing here are screenshots from a POC that we developed to facilitate this webinar. To the degree anyone's interested in the future, please reach out. We're happy to demonstrate the POC itself. But what you're seeing here is a business process. And there's 5 key steps in this business process. In order to kind of walk you through what's important about this, the tool does the same thing as the ebook that Kate just showed. It's showing you a process. We can get down to a sub-process level. We can get down to a task level. The difference is an EPSS has higher level of functionality. It has greater search capabilities, and it allows for the user, the worker in this case, to create favorites so that they can shortcut. They've got fast paths to things that they most frequently need or go to. So let's do a little bit of a further drill down on this, and let's take a look at this last step, number 4, ensure data integrity. So we're moving from the business process to the sub-process. And so you see the first step in the business process here. You see the sub-processes that exist. And we want to look at a little bit more detail about the sub-process. And let's look at check for TMF completeness. So when we click on that, we then move away from a process view into more of a task-oriented view. What you see on this screen, the next step would be the high-level steps in order to perform the work. And sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes it's just, I always forget the 3rd step. What is it that I needed to do? And so these tasks, they're called quick steps. They provide you with that reminder. But maybe that's not enough. And maybe you're saying, oh, I don't quite remember exactly what I'm supposed to do with this task. Put yourselves in the shoes of the worker. They're the ones trying to complete their job responsibilities, fulfill them. And this is a point of frustration. If I'm not sure, I can't remember myself, I don't remember from training that I had that maybe took place too long ago for me to reasonably remember, I maybe used to be able to reach around the corner or over the cube or what have you to ask a peer who is doing the same work that I'm doing. If not, then I need to reach out to a supervisor, a manager, or a SME, depending upon the nature of the work that's being done. And that's where frustration starts to set in. And if you have too many incidents of frustration, that's where workers start to disengage, and you have the potential for a contributing factor to attrition. I won't say the only, but a contributing factor. So by providing the detail, and what you'll see here is this drop down. And so if you were to click on that in the POC, what it would pull up is the detailed steps about what you need to do. Within each of these discrete steps and inside of the EPSS, we can include things like, screenshots from other systems or other data or information that would be important. But it helps, again, the worker in order to continue to move forward in a way that allows for better efficiency and overall better quality, reducing the number of errors that could potentially occur. It also, in this approach, can address change. So let's just say there's been, step number 2 in this process changed. And we received we as the worker group received some sort of communication or other notice about it. And there may have even needed to be training on it, separate and aside from the work you're doing. Maybe yes, maybe no. By having the discipline to use this type of a tool, if I don't quite remember what the change was, it's already there in front of my face. So it inherently helps you to address the change management. efforts that you need to put into place to make sure that everybody is doing things as you expect them to do so you receive the outcomes that you do. The other interesting thing about this that I'll point out is this sidebar where we've got a lot of additional references. Kate talked about it in respect to the pyramid. So those lower levels of the pyramid can provide deepening levels of information that might be of interest or necessary to the person. It could be another e-learning. It could be that there's a link that takes you back to an e-learning that you previously did, that you say, you know what, this is really helpful, but I really want to reground myself. I'm going to go back at some point during the day and retake that e-learning because I think that it'll be most beneficial to me. It could be something completely different than that. And so this reference that we have in the POC actually brings up a video. The types of content that you can put in as part of this type of a tool are really widely varied, which is what takes me back to where I started, with 5 sources of content all being vital to support the workforce. You know, maybe it's an SOP. You need to link back into that. Maybe it's, you know, some sort of an announcement that, you know, about a product change, and you want to understand better the context. And so you're going to link back. You could curate to make that internal announcement available in the context of all of the resources that are here. The other thing that's important that I'll point out is up here at the top where it's, whoops, sorry, that was a double click on my part. You can see the My Favorites. If I want to tag anything in the EPS as my favorites, it becomes part of my personal dashboard so that I can get back there. So I think you've seen 2 very different examples. There's some options in the middle. You know, we're showing an EPSS. For those of you who have heard of a DAP, a digital adoption platform, that's another example of a way to enable this type of support that's needed in the workflow, but it's a different type of technology, has a little bit different purpose than the EPSS. So what I think would be helpful, Kate, is if we spend a little bit of time talking about just some experiences, certain use cases where we've seen companies adopt this approach very successfully.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, you know, it's really, when you think about use cases, we're really not limited. It's not limited to any particular type of employee. It's not limited to particular type of environment. It's also not just about supporting system implementations or business process changes. So we're going to cover a sampling, but by all means, this is not, this is just a sampling that we're aware, you know, that we're familiar with. So the first one that you see here is a manufacturing case. And the situation here was that shift workers needed to be able to cross over from their usual production line into a different production line that created a different product and used different equipment and very complex equipment. So the workflow learning solution really needed to include mobile performance support because, you know, they're working with their hands. They need to be able to pull whatever support they have over to where they're working. And that mobile performance support provided visuals to them as well as very concrete steps of what folks needed to do in order to work that production line. It really helped with this complex equipment. And as a result of this solution, the product output actually met quality standards and there was reduced time downtime, even though, again, people used to work in one production line were put onto totally different equipment. With that support and that scaffolding and performance support available at their fingertips, they were able to do that. The next case that I want to mention is actually a healthcare case. And in this case, they were finding that a hospital system was finding that their nurses were actually losing their knowledge, you know, lack of retention of knowledge in between their compliance testing that was done. For example, there were actually changes in medication dosing that they needed to keep up with. And so the solution was an EPSS that supported all their moments of need. In addition, they use adaptive learning that was provided to kind of retest that knowledge from time to time in between the formal testing. And that entire workflow learning solution really contributed to consistency in the performance of all those nurses. And Debbie, I think you're going to take us through the next couple of use cases.
I am. So this one's actually really interesting because it was situationally driven. This is an example of a need that our federal government had last year during the pandemic, when they needed to stand up a COVID contact tracing center and do so very quickly. What ended up happening is the structure was put into place, the process was put into place, the agents who were supporting via this contact center were put into place very, very quickly. There was simply not sufficient time to go through any sort of a formal training. And what they did in honestly, no lie, and it was a very focused effort. So, you know, there were some guardrails around it, but very focused effort. In 2 weeks, they adopted this type of an approach in order to enable the scripts and the other information that the agents needed to use, you know, Q&A that needed to be answered. 2 weeks, they were able to take 500 agents who were brand new into this role, as everybody would have been, you know, last summer, and they went live. They took them live. Now, I will be honest in telling you that the first 30 days were very much evolutionary. As feedback came in, they were making real-time changes, they were making adaptations, but they were still functional, they were operating. They just continued to improve upon the operations. And as I talked about before, because of having a performance support tool available to them, that helped to affect the change that they were making on a real-time basis over the next 30, 60 days, much more effective to roll out so that everybody understood what to do. I found that to be a very impressive use case. Mm-hmm. The second one deals with a significant business technology, business process change that took place with a life sciences company. And they had rolled out both. What they were seeing were a lot of errors occurring and a lot of reliance on the managers, supervisors, and the SMEs in particular, because the end users who were doing the work didn't always know exactly what to do and how to do it. And so there was heavy, heavy reliance. We adopted this approach, and in this case, it was a more low-tech, a more simplified tool. It was using SharePoint, actually, in a very effective and successful way, such that the end users were provided the support that they needed while they were doing the work, so that it ended up ultimately reducing onboarding time for new members. It reduced, as Kate was talking about before, the amount of time necessary to do the training, and ultimately reduced reliance on those who had really, like a SME, for example, the role that the SMEs needed to be playing was for escalations, not the everyday, normal, usual kind of questions that could be answered by using this type of performance support tool, but those things that were much more complex. That's how their time was much better spent, and that's in fact what happened. And the outcome of this one was truly, we had much better feedback from the L&D team as well as the end users. You know, so one end user even proactively offered it was the best sort of training support overall combination that they'd ever experienced. So Kate, maybe how about 2 more real quick?
Yep. So the first one here is management consulting. It's a management consulting company that was onboarding a center of excellence. They experienced a 25% capacity gain and about a 30% reduction in classroom training by providing targeted training up front with practice, along with an EPSS that was able to support them while they were in the flow of work. What was critical to this, though, was also a lot of change management. And change management is going to be key to any company or business unit or function that is going to roll this out for the first time, right? It's a very different way of learning and having support. If people are used to going into the classroom or just taking e-learnings, this is going to be a very different way. And so it does take a level of change management and communications and really showing people the benefits to all of this, as they start to move through this new solution. The other, the last one I want to share with you is financial services. So there were role responsibilities that were expanding. So where a staff member maybe took care of one type of account in the past, now all of a sudden they had to take care of 3 different types of accounts. And so information on those accounts were in many different places, as you can imagine, on their intranet or in knowledge bases. So a workflow learning ebook was able to pull that information together, consolidate the different account information within the context of their new roles and their work. So that really helped organize the information. And then they made sure that there were regular check-ins with an expert to give that extra hand-holding that was needed during that time. So again, hopefully these use cases showed you that there's a wide range of challenges out there and also audience support, various initiatives like upskilling, cross-training, but workflow learning can really support all of those. And it can be a simple solution like an ebook, or it can be a much more highly advanced technological solution like an EPSS, again, depending on where the client is and the nature of the project. So, so how do we get started with this? Debbie, do you want to give us some, best practices on how folks can actually get started in their own companies?
Sure. So I think there needs to be a conscientious effort to focus on the performance that the business needs, not just the knowledge that needs to be built. What is the performance that the business needs? And so that mindset shift that needs to occur to say, we're going to make our first assessment, our first evaluation before we decide anything from a solutioning perspective about what's necessary in order to do the work. One of the benefits of that is it allows the L&D team to be much closer to the business because of that type of interaction that's necessary to understand the performance. It really will help to contribute to create more of a valued partner relationship down the lines. And then being able, I think, to, again, there's going to be some front-end change potentially. Some organizations see it and they say, wow, that's it. This is the solution that we've been looking for. Where has it been? They can't move fast enough. Other organizations are going to hang back and be a little more uncertain or even reluctant. And so, what you need to do is, as part of that change management, to cultivate the understanding and awareness of the benefits of this type of a focus, it will be important too. Then, we've outlined, I think, some of the benefits that can accrue to both the organization as well as ultimately to the learners, the end users of this, any of this, the workers, the L&D group. And so I think, making sure that in those engagements that happen as a result of making sure that people understand why this is an approach that you want to lean on for an adoption perspective, making sure that those benefits are consistently threaded through that conversation so that people will really relate it to something that is important and meaningful to them with the operations role that they have or other business role that they have. And then, lastly, the other thing too, in order to be successful with this, is just a lot of clear definition. What you need to do, what you're trying to do, get the buy-in from the business and other SMEs who are part of that business with, agreement on the primary objectives, the ultimate scope, the learner audience, and what you want to do so that it informs the how to. We don't decide the how, until we decide what it is that we need to do. Kate, what else? Do you have other things to add here?
Yeah, I think, from what I've experienced with this, I think the most critical skill that you're going to need in your teams when working on these types of projects is really going to be consultative questioning, right? So to really get to the true performance that is needed, not only for the business unit, the organization, but also to get to, the employee and their role performance that is needed. So when we're trying to discuss with our SMEs or our sponsors, and we're trying to get to those performance objectives, your contact, if they're the traditional SME who's just handed over a lot of content over the years and is stuck in that knowing land, they might want to keep dwelling on that. Well, they need to know this, they need to know that, they need to know this. So we need to, again, try to educate them and shift their performance mindset to one of doing, right? So what is the performance? What are people actually doing with all this information? Ask those questions, and let them know that that's where we need to start. If we don't start with performance, if we start here with knowledge, we're not going to reach the organization's goals. We need to start with what people are doing at the moment of apply, and then we can back into what people need to know to do and make sure that content's still in there. But that's not what's that's not what's driving everything. It's the performance that's driving the content.
Thanks, Kate.
Mm-hmm.
So here we go. How do we get started? Do it simply. Identify one type of a function or goal, clearly define your scope, go through the documentation of all the processes, determine what task you're trying to solve for, supporting knowledge that you need, build that prototype or the proof of concept. Once you've got that and you are able to share it with your targeted group for this initial effort, get their buy-in, get their questions, make whatever tweaks that you need to. Once you have the buy-in from that stakeholder group, you can then take it out to pilot. And I'll tell you what we've seen and experienced is once a pilot rolls out and has done so successfully, this takes care of itself. It's almost a success breeds success type of a cycle that people start talking about it. We've had situations where our L&D clients become, very big champions and supporters. They start advocating for this type of an approach to be adopted. They will sponsor from, one group into another, and it takes on a little bit of a life itself. And, Kate, you talked about the one hospital. And in the one use case example, the pipeline of projects that they ended up with in a short period of time was really pretty remarkable.
I think it was 95.
Yeah.
95.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And again,
so 95 different workflows mapped out, performance support available for people at all moments of the day. That's critical. We're dealing with really life-threatening situations where if you don't have the right information at your fingertips, there's going to be a problem. Yeah.
All right.
So so you want me to summarize, Deb?
Yeah. Will you please summarize? Then we've got some great questions that we will. I don't think we can get to all of them, but
so real quick summary then. So that, a workflow learning solution really is going to ensure that learning centered on how to best support the learner's performance, providing practice through targeted training, plus instruction, information, performance support, all at the same time as employees do their work. That those performance support solutions enable employees to apply their learning as they work. And in the end, your employees are going to feel much more confident and self-reliant as they will access the resources that they need at the moment that they need them. That really helps them get the job done efficiently, effectively, and it helps them continuously improve and innovate. We'll open it up to questions now and see how much we can cover in the 5 minutes we have left.
Okay. So let me take the first one because it goes back to the study. And the question is around, Deggy, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Thank you for your question. The question is, what was the sample size of the companies who were in the studies and the respondents, essentially looking for the demographics. It was about 300 participants. There was a broad cross-section across industries and company sizes, and the respondents themselves were everything from individual contributors up through various management levels to the more senior level positions. So what I liked about that is it allowed for a full perspective. So it's not just, what are the Fortune 100 doing, and maybe a smaller organization or, a startup organization trying to mirror what a Fortune 100 who's much more mature is doing. It provided the input and feedback from that broad cross-section. And, again, I thought that the results were very telling. So, Kate, here's one for you, I think, that you can address is,
Sure.
What about targeted training that you talked about? And, is that the same thing as traditional learning? Maybe distinguish that a little bit.
Sure. So targeted training it can take the form of modalities that you've seen traditional learning have. So it can be, targeted training can be e-learning. It can be online simulations. It can be classroom training. It can be one-on-one coaching. So it can be all the good things that you've already done in the past, right? The difference is that what we're going to put into that effort up front is going to be those tasks that have the most critical impact for failure out on the job. So someone's learning something new. Someone mentioned about the 5 moments of need and how do you create events for the 5 moments of need and for different audiences. That was another question there. When you're teaching someone new, if you're onboarding someone into a new job, you need to give them context. They need to know, what is my work going to look like at the end of the day? What's the flow of the work? But then when you've got them for those couple of days or a few hours, if you're standing up a call center in two weeks, you might just have a few hours for people. You're going to talk about the real critical stuff. Like, if you don't get this right, we're going to lose money, or we're going to lose products. We're going to lose customers. All right. If you don't get these tasks right, this is what's going to happen. So we want people to be able to practice in targeted learning those higher risk tasks and give them performance support at the same time, right? So if they're in a call center situation and we have them practicing a call, we're going to have information at their fingertips that they can reference while they're on that call, right? And that's going to follow them into the workplace so that they've already gotten used to using the performance support. Now they're out there in the call center. They can remember what they learned in practice, and they can also access their performance support. So that's the difference. It's really targeted on those higher risk tasks.
Thanks, Kate. Okay. I want to go to one that addresses that point of connectivity that I was trying to draw between the 5 sources of content that we observed as being key and vital, and how we need to enable a workforce today. And, Monica, you asked about, a great deal of sustainment for content supporting this performance model. What it requires, and so this, again, Kate, you can probably talk a little bit more about, the adoption process once I get through this piece of it for Monica. But what it requires is the more traditional roles in L&D that we've known for a long time, taking on some different characters, some different responsibilities. And so you will always have a group of people who you're going to keep as a core to do the targeted training that's necessary. Like I said, there's nothing about this model that says what we've done for decades is wrong. What it's saying is it's not sufficient in and of itself on its own. we need to supplement, we need to add to it by providing the performance support. So by maintaining a core of people who are still focused on all of the targeted training needs that an organization has, but then having another group of people who are much more focused on that interaction with the business groups, with the operation leads, where you're trying to solve the business problem, and understanding what that is, going through the approach at that workflow and task level. And then as you build out that performance pyramid, it's not creating new content. What it is a curation job. How do we take advantage of all the tremendously great content that already exists and just reorganize it differently so that it's much more accessible? So, Monica, I hope that helps to explain it a little bit more. So, hey, Steve, it looks like we've gone over a bit. I apologize. We didn't get to all of the questions. Certainly if you would like Kate and I to address anything specifically, our emails are on this slide that will be available to you through the download that Steve has made available. And why don't we just, out of respect for everybody's time, create a wrapper on this. So, Kate, any final thoughts before I give my thanks?
I think as you said it, Debbie, it's all about starting small, right? So start small with this, get some good wins. If you still, there's a lot to learn about this, please, we have some white papers on the conduit.com website that you can read about this. And Apply Synergies has an amazing online community and great podcasts. So go to their website as well if you want to learn more about this. But yes, please reach out to us if you have any questions about how to get started on this.
Once again, thank you all for taking the time to join Kate and me. Hopefully you found some new insights or ideas from the information that we shared with you today. And we wish you all a good remainder of your day and week. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you so much, Kate, as well. We really do appreciate you guys taking this time today to present all this great information with us. So thank you again. I do want to thank the audience as well for joining in and to continue to support our Chief Learning Officer webinars. And of course, thank you to our good friends over at Conduit for sponsoring today's event. Be sure to register for our next Chief Learning Officer webinar happening on Tuesday, October 26th. Titled Creating a Coaching Culture in Your Organization. Once again, that's Tuesday, October 26th, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. This concludes today's webcast. Stay safe, everyone. Have a great day.